Hi everyone, I'm Suraaj. Today I'm going to be talking about our work constructing side channel attacks on Optane persistent memory. This is joint work with Samira's group at UVA and Daniel's group at TU Graz, and one was done when I was an intern with Samira at UVA. Intel recently released Optane persistent memory, which provides fast, byte-addressable storage to applications. Ideal use cases for Optane are in cloud data centers. Here, hardware is shared between applications from different vendors, and there is a real threat of side channel attacks that can leak sensitive information. So inspired by this, we broke down Optane. We reverse engineered Optane to uncover interesting microarchitectural details. Finally, we use these details as attack primitives to construct potentially interesting side channel and covert channel attacks. Let me start with some background on Optane. Optane is a recently released memory chip from Intel. Like DRAM, it sits on your DIMM. It's inserted into your DIMM slots. In fact, you can use DRAM and Optane together in your system. Also, like traditional DRAM, Optane communicates with the CPU using a DDR protocol. Finally, Optane, being proprietary, is almost a black box, and very, very few details are known about Optane. Optane actually provides stable storage with direct access. Traditionally, access to persistent storage devices like disk is mediated by the kernel and the file system. Moreover, there is a level of indirection as there is a granularity difference, and the data is written to the device at page granularity, while applications might want to access bytes. While using persistent memory, however, there is nothing that acts as a mediator, and applications have direct access to Optane. Moreover, this is at byte granularity, so they can manipulate at very fine granularity. In the system hierarchy, Optane sits between DRAM and fast storage like SSDs. In terms of access latency, Optane is much closer to DRAM, even though it provides persistent storage. However, when we look at storage capacities, Optane is much closer to SSDs, even though it's like DRAM, and a single DIMM can store as much as 512 gigabytes. So now we smell a side channel attack, so let's consider how it will work. We have an incredibly secure system here, and attackers are finding it impossibly difficult to extract secrets. Next, we actually break down Optane to uncover interesting microarchitectural details. Now, what happens is that these can function as new information channels, and adversaries can learn sensitive information from these channels, and this forms a side channel attack. So let's start with our first work, which is reverse engineering Optane. So thanks to prior work, Optane was not really a black box when we started, so I'm going to make it a blue box. So prior works has showed that Optane has two levels of buffers. The first is called a read modify write buffer. Then the next buffer is called an address translation buffer or an AIT buffer. And only then does data reach Optane media. And prior work has showed us that Optane's RMW buffer is a 16 kilobyte structure with 256 byte entries. The AIT buffer is a 16 megabyte structure with 4 kilobyte entries. And properties of non-volatile memories in general make us suspect that there might be a well-leveling scheme at play. So our work, we provide many more details. We have more cache details such as the associativity and the replacement policy of Optane. We also have a satisfactory description of the well-leveling mechanism on Optane. When well-leveling happens, what exactly gets remapped, and how exactly does Optane achieve well-leveling? And apart from these details, we do have other surprising details. So let's start with our on-DIMM caches or buffers. So we find that the RMW buffer is a fully associative structure which follows a LRU-ish replacement policy. The AIT buffer is a 16-way set associative structure which also follows an LRU-ish replacement policy. And our next work deals with well-leveling. And before I start with well-leveling on Optane, let me remind everyone how well-leveling works in memories. Non-volatile memory cells have limited cell lifetimes. So if you keep writing to the same memory cell, it will get worn out more and more until it gets destroyed and there is permanent data loss. Well-leveling comes to the rescue here. Here, if you keep writing to a cell, it actually gets remapped to a different physical location. And in this way, your writes are distributed to the entire memory set of pages. and the wheres are effectively leveled. So we do find that where leveling does happen on Optane. So this is a graph that shows you our experiment where we keep writing to the same memory location. The x-axis shows the write iteration number, and the y-axis shows the latency of every write. And we find that typical write latency is around 1 microsecond. However, every 10 to 11,000 writes, we observe a spike in the latencies. And we do see that this spike is almost 40 times normal write latency. And we see that this does correspond to well leveling. And our experiments show that there is a 4 kilobyte data migration that happens, and every page is 4 kilobytes in size. So we expected that Optane would follow a pretty straightforward implementation of well leveling, where there would be one counter, well leveling counter for every 4 kilobyte page. And whenever one of these counters gets overflows, the entire page gets remapped. But Optane had different plans for us. So when we tested with Optane, we found that every 4 kilobyte page had 16 independent counters, and there was one counter for every 256 byte line. And when any of these counters overflowed, the entire 4 kilobyte page was remapped. And apart from this, Optane had other curveballs for us. For instance, the CL flush instruction was an interesting example. So we thought CL stands for cache line, which is obviously CPU cache line, and the expectation is that CL flush instruction flushes only CPU caches. However, when we tested our CL flush instruction, we found that the instruction actually reached Optane. What that means is that it flushes the read modified write buffer that I spoke about previously. So this is an experiment. This is a histogram that shows you that with CL flush, the latency is much higher and actually corresponds to the media access latency, correspond to without CL flush, where it's just the buffer latency. Another interesting phenomenon we observed with Optane was the significant read-write contention when you had Optane persistent, when you had concurrent readers and writers. So if we have a lone reader core that's reading data from Optane, we can expect to get a latency of 400 nanoseconds. But what happens is when you have a concurrent writer that's writing to a different location on Optane, your read latency is significantly degraded. So as you can see in these histograms, when you have a concurrent writer, your read latency is almost 2.5 times worse. So now that I showed you our reverse engineering experiments, I want to show you how we use these to construct attacks. So here's a bird's eye view of our attacks. We reverse engineered Optane to get more internal details. So these are sources of vulnerabilities, which we call attack primitives. First, we have read-write contention that I showed you before. Then we have our internal buffers. And finally, we have the well leveling mechanism that I talked about. And using these, we construct 4 attacks in our paper. The read-write contention phenomenon can be used to easily construct a local covert channel. Using our internal buffers, we can construct a local covert channel and a local side channel. And well leveling actually gives us 2 different covert channels that we can construct. We can construct a remote covert channel, and we also construct a new kind of asynchronous covert channel, which I call the noteboard attack. In this talk, I'll be focusing on the noteboard attack. For more details on our other attacks, I request you to read our paper. So I'm going to be talking about the noteboard attack in here, and the idea is that we encode a secret message on Optane's well leveling data. So here we have a set of Optane pages. Each page has some data and some invisible metadata in the form of well leveling counters. To encode a top secret message, what you do is you basically write to a few selected pages. The data that you write does not matter. It can be the same data. So what happens here is the well leveling counters are affected. Nothing else gets affected. So the well leveling counters of your selected pages get affected. Now to decode the message, you basically write to all the pages and wear them out. So everything gets worn out. The well leveling counters are reset. However, you will find that a few pages get worn out faster, and you can use this difference to construct, to send a secret binary message and therefore any message. So that's the idea, and here's how we realized it in our experiments. We have a key value store server, which is Optane backed. This server is accessed by a remote sender and a remote receiver, and they share a file on the server, which I call the noteboard. To encode the message, the sender writes to selected keys on the key value store, And the receiver can actually start after some time because there's no requirement to start immediately. And to extract the message, the receiver writes to all keys and wears them out. And as I showed before, they can establish covert communication. So we had interesting results. So our channel is asynchronous. There is no shared clock requirement between the sender and receiver, and the receiver need not start immediately after the message has been encoded. Our channel is pretty accurate. It has a very low error rate, around 5% vanilla, and if we use an error correcting code, the error rate becomes much lower. And it's also persistent. The encoded data is persistent and can be recovered after waiting for a day and even after your system reboots. Well, now you all are super excited about this talk and can't wait to go home and buy Optane and try our attacks on it, but Intel discontinued Optane. But hope is not lost because CXL technology seeks to bring storage class memory back into systems. For instance, Samsung just announced technology just like Optane for CXL, and not just Samsung. There are other companies that are doing this work too. And it's quite reasonable to believe that these devices will also have buffers, will also have well-leveling schemes, and our ideas can be used to construct hardware attacks there too. Right. Here's my talk in a nutshell. Intel released Optane persistent memory. We reverse engineered Optane. We constructed side channel attacks on Optane. And finally, even though Optane is now discontinued, new storage class memory devices are on the rise, and I think our work might give us a head start in finding potential vulnerabilities in those devices too. Thank you.